Assalamu alaikum. This is Zafran Saeed, and today's lecture we are going to discuss Marxism theory. Marxism theory is basically an literary criticism. It is a theory that examines literature as a reflection of the social and economic conditions in which it was produced. Marxist critics analyze how power relations are reflected in literature, and how literature can serve as a tool for either challenging or reinforcing the dominant ideology. Marxism, in according to Advanced Learner Dictionary, it is defined as the political and economic theories of Karl Marx, which explains the changes and developments in the society as the result of opposition between the social classes. For example, in the novel The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald, Marxist critiques might focus on the class dynamics that are present in the text. For example, the character of Gatsby, who is a self-made millionaire, can be seen as a representation of American dream, but Marxist critique might argue that his success is built on the exploitations of others, particularly the exploitation of the working class. They might also examine the character of Tom Buchanan, who comes from old money and is portrayed as arrogant and dismissive of those beneath him. Then we have some elements that must be taken into account in order to analyze a text with a Marxist lens. So these are several key elements are here. The first one is consider the social and economic context in which the text was produced. So, Marxist analysis uh, seeks to understand how a text reflects and the social and economic conditions of its time. So, what was happening in the society at the time the text was written? Means what was happening at that time when the text was written, what were the prevailing economic and political ideologies of the time. In order to analyze a text, these conditions must be taken into account. The second one is examine the class dynamics present in the text. So, in order to analyze a text, one must look at how power and wealth are distributed in that text, because Marxist analysis looks at how power and wealth are distributed in the text and how this affects the characters and their interactions. Means who are the powerful characters in the text and how do they maintain their power? Who are the exploited characters and how they are treated? Then after examining the class dynamics, we must have to look for the themes related to labor and exploitation, because Marxist analysis often focuses on how labor is portrayed in the text and how the characters relationship to work affect their lives. Are these characters who are portrayed as being exploited or oppressed by those who are in power, or how does the text portray the relationship between the workers and the capitalist? Then we have to consider the rule of ideology and the text, because Marxist analysis requires they look at how the dominant ideology of a society is reflected in the text, and how this affect the characters and their actions. Does the text reinforce or challenge the dominant ideology of the time? Are these characters who represent different ideological positions, how do they interact with each other? Then finally, examine the portrayal of social change and revolution should be taken into account, because it also focuses on how social change is portrayed in the text and whether the text supports or critiques revolutionary movements. Are there the characters who are fighting for social change, and how are they portrayed? How does the text depict the possibility of social transformation? By following these steps, means these 5 steps, you can analyze a text with a Marxist lens and gain a deeper understanding of how the text reflects the social and economic conditions of its times. Then we have to apply this Marxism theory on a short story, The Lottery. And this story, we also applied a structuralism theory, which is in the previous video. But in this video, in this lecture, we will apply Marxism. Oh, the short story, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, using a Marxist lens. The Lottery is a story about a small town that holds an annual lottery to choose one person will be stoned to death by the other members of the community. From a Marxist perspective, the story can be read as an allegory about the exploitation of the working class by those who are in power. Now, what is allegory? Allegory is the expression of truths and or generalization about human existence by means of symbolic fictional figures and their actions. Or you can also define it a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. The best example of allegory as the one of the most famous example of allegory is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Uh, so we can say that Marxism should be applied on the lottery by analyzing that what elements we are checking here. The elements that are used in this short story by using Marxist lens. Uh, First, we consider the class dynamics present in the story. The villagers are portrayed as a close knit community, but there are clear class distinctions. How? For example, we the men gather together in the story. The men gather together and talk about planting and rain, tractors and taxes, while the women, on other hand, are excluded from this conversation. They are just allowed to talk about household and household tasks and children. So men are allowed to talk about everything while women were not. This suggests that there is a gender division of labor in the community, with men controlling the economic and political sphere while women are neglected to domestic sphere. Next, we can examine the rule of labor and exploitation in the story. The lottery is presented as a communal event, but it is clear that some people benefit from it more than others. How, for example, Mr. Summers. Mr. Summers, who runs the lottery. Mr. Summers, who runs the lottery, is described as jovial and smiling, suggesting that he is in a position of power. Meanwhile, the rest of the villagers are anxious and nervous, suggesting that they are being exploited by the lottery in some way. The fact that the lottery is held on 27th of June, which is described as the height of summer, suggests that the lottery is connected to agricultural labor and the harvest. This reinforces the idea that the lottery is a tool for powerful to exploit the labor of the working class. Then finally, we can consider the portrayal of social change and revolution in the story. While there are no characters who explicitly challenge the lottery or the power structures in the village, but there is a sense of unease and dissatisfaction among some villagers. If we look at Mrs. Hutchinson, Mrs. Hutchinson, uh, who complains about the lottery and that it isn't fair, and she says that it isn't right. So this suggests that there is a potential for resistance and social change among the villagers, but it is ultimately suppressed by the powerful forces that controls the community. And then finally, at the last we can say that Marxism and literary criticism seeks to analyze literature as a reflection of power relation and social structures present in a given society, and to examine how literature can either reinforce or challenge these structures. Thank you for watching this video.